Forged in agony and sanctified through flesh, the Trench Pilgrim Communicant is a hulking fanatic, blinded by devotion, yet blessed with sight beyond sight. He marches forward as a living miracle and a weapon of holy annihilation, dragging his sacred burden into the heart of the enemy line. In this tutorial, we'll bring this brutal, sacred monstrosity to life using speed paints paired with Grimdark enamel washes, easy but effective rust effects, and raw, inflamed red skin splattered with fresh blood. No polish, no mercy. Welcome to the Dark Forge. Hey there and welcome back, and thank you for joining me on the very first painting tutorial on my newly rebranded channel. Before we dive in, I just wanted to say a quick word about the rebrand. For the most part, the only thing that's changing is the name. The content will remain largely the same, with plenty of Trench Crusade painting videos. But I'm also going to be bringing back some variety with some Warhammer 40k, Age of Sigmar, The Old World, and a few other games. So things will be a bit more of a mix going forward, but there still should be something here for everyone. And with all that said, let's jump into today's tutorial, which is for the Trench Pilgrims Communicant. And this is going to be a commission piece for a good friend and channel supporter who wanted the model printed off at twice the size of the original, which makes the already large model absolutely enormous, but in general should make it easier to paint some of the smaller details. And the first step of the process was to prime the model, and any black primer would do here, but my primer of choice is Green Stuff World Matte Black Primer. It's fairly cheap and comes in a decent sized bottle, and I just use it through the airbrush, and it's a lot more cost efficient than using spray can primers. And the next part of the process was to apply an all over dry brush of Army Painter Company Grey, and I use this to build up the base for any contrast paints that I'm going to be using later on in the process. And I have had a few questions about why I don't use an airbrush for this part of the process. And the reason for this is that using the dry brush is a lot easier to get into all of the recesses, while at the same time leaving all of the very deepest recesses inside of all of the cracks and folds still in the black primer. And even though you could potentially achieve this with an airbrush, I find that the final result is a little bit better when you use a dry brush. And once that was applied, it was then time to start to get the base coats down. And I firstly wanted to focus on the skin. I really wanted to build up a nice grimdark, purpley red, sore skin tone. And to achieve this, I firstly applied 2 layers of Vallejo Express Demonic Skin, and just applied this to all flesh areas across the model, making sure I wick up any excess pooling along the way. Next it was back to the dry brush, this time with some Citadel Pallid Witch Flesh. And I'm just going to be applying this again over all of the flesh, similar to the first dry brushing step, and this should give a more sickly looking skin, while leaving all of the red demonic skin tone still in all of the recesses. Next, I'm going to be applying an all-over wash to all of the skin, and that's going to consist of a 50-50 mix of Citadel Caraborg Crimson and Citadel Druchii Violet. And I also thinned this down 50-50 with some water, just to make sure it's flowing nice and smoothly, and use this to tint all of the flesh and bring back all of the colour. And at this stage of the process, I was fairly happy with the skin. I wasn't quite finished with it, but for now I wanted to focus on some of the other parts of the model, just so I could get a bigger picture of the rest of the model and see where I wanted to take the skin next. And I firstly wanted to paint all of the robes, and to do this I used some Vallejo Express Lanzer Grey, which is much more of a dark green colour, and I really like it for Grimdark painting, and it was perfect for these areas. Once that was done, I then wanted to tackle all of the rust, and for that I'm just going to be using my usual quick and easy rust, using a combination of the Army Painter Dark Rust and Fresh Rust. Base coating all of these areas firstly in the Dark Rust, and then just coming in with a very light dry brush of the Fresh Rust, trying to hit some of the raised areas and dabbing it on randomly to certain areas, which just provides some nice variation to the rust effect. And then once that was dry, I then just come in with some Army Painter Gun Metal and apply a very quick and light dry brush to all of the rusted areas. And this is a really important part of the rust process, as it makes it look more realistic and metallic. And for the base coating of all of the other smaller parts of the model, the exact colours aren't really all that important. I will put a list down in the description of exactly what I used, but to give you a quick rundown here, I firstly used some Army Painter Greedy Gold to quickly dry brush in all of the gold areas, which was the two large bells on the end of the weapon. Vallejo Express Bag of Bones for all of the skulls and bones that are scattered across the model. Mummy White for all of the cloth that's on the head and gloves, and also all of the ropes as well. battle dress brown for all of the leathers, and mahogany for all of the wood. And now that all of the base colours had been applied, I decided to go back in and give a very light dry brush of the same Citadel Pallid Witch Flesh to all of the raised and upward facing skin areas. And this should just give all of the skin a basic highlight. I then applied a few Templar style transfers to some of the empty wooden boards. And I normally apply a quick coat of gloss varnish to the area I want the transfer on, then use some microsol and microset to apply, and then once it's dry I'll come in with some satin varnish just to take away the shine. And to make the transfers more realistic and battle damaged, I just go in with a little bit of brown paint and apply some scratches and chips across the surface. Now it was time to apply the Grimdark enamels, and I went for a 2-to-1 mix of Goon's Grime and Ichor of the Damned, thinned down 50-50 with some white spirits, and then applied over the entire model, which I had just previously given a coat of satin varnish. And as always, just let this flow into all of the recesses, making sure that you wick up any of the excess pulling. And then leave that to dry for around 10 to 15 minutes, and then coming in with some makeup sponges that are very slightly dampened with some white spirits, and then using a dabbing motion, use this to reactivate the enamel washes, and wick up and remove all of the excess from any of the raised and upward facing areas that would be naturally more highlighted, and just leaving the enamel wash in all of the cracks and recesses. And once that had been done, all that was left to do was apply a few finishing touches. Firstly, by reapplying a dry brush of the Citadel Pallid Witch Flesh, just to bring back some of the highlights to the skin tone. Followed up by applying some neat Goon's Grime to all of the bottom parts of the cloak, and also the feet, and a few select areas towards the bottom part of the model. And all you need to do here is dab it on to the areas you want, and then come in with a clean brush and stipple away at all of the edges, which will just feather it into the rest of the area. And by doing this, it just adds a little bit extra dirt and grime to these areas. I then come in with some Army Painter Fanatics Dry Blood, and just use this to paint in some blood drips in and around where the crosses have been pinned to the body. And I'm then just going to take this same dry blood, and using a toothbrush I'm going to spray it on to random parts of the model, just to give it a more gory and blood-soaked feel. And the final part of the process was to add some AK Muddy Ground textured paste to all of the bottom areas of the cloth and wooden panels. And this is already a nice brown colour, so when applied leaves a really realistic looking dirt effect. And once that was done, everything was then complete, apart from the basing. And for that I just used some Battlefield bases, STLs that I had, and after printing them off I added some extras to them. Mainly just using some coffee stirrers and some Green Stuff World barbed wire, and just painted it in using similar contrast paints that I used on the model. And before I go, I just want to say a big thank you to all of my Patreon subscribers, as well as all of the YouTube subscribers that have stuck with me throughout this rebrand. I really appreciate everyone's support in getting this far, and hopefully with your continued support I can take the channel to the next level. So a big thank you to you all, and I'll see you in the next one.